Level 1, HDD, the hard disk drive. Storage's old guard. Pop one open and you'll find a spinning platter with a tiny mechanical arm hovering over it, seeking out whatever data you asked for. Picture a vintage turntable, except the record holds your entire digital life instead of a vinyl track. And truthfully, for a lot of use cases, it still gets the job done. Data persists through power loss. You can stack up terabytes without emptying your wallet. The cost per gigabyte ratio is simply unbeaten. But there's a catch people rarely stop to think about. That physical arm has to physically travel. Every single read, every single write, no exceptions. That computer sitting at the boot screen for 5 minutes, that's a mechanical arm dragging itself across a rotating surface, hunting down your operating system piece by piece. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Knock it at the wrong moment, and that arm scratches the disk. Not a corrupted file, not a slowdown, not a warning. Gone. Immediately and completely. No degradation curve, no heads up. Every level on this list exists in some way, because this simply wasn't good enough. Level 2, SSD. Strip out the platter. Eliminate the arm entirely. That's the SSD solid-state drive in a single sentence. No moving components whatsoever. Just flash chips. Data gets written electronically and comes back almost the moment you ask for it. Anyone who's swapped from spinning rust to solid state for the first time doesn't forget the experience. 5 to 10 times the speed of an HDD. A 5-minute boot shrinks to under 15 seconds. Applications are open before you've even processed clicking them. And without mechanical parts, physical abuse barely registers. Shake it, drop it, throw it in a bag. It simply doesn't care. Here's the insight that actually matters, though. In most slow computers, the CPU was never the culprit. It never was. The hard drive was throttling everything else. Slot an SSD into aging hardware, and the transformation is jarring. Identical processor, identical RAM, completely different machine. People spend money on replacements when a single inexpensive drive swap would have fixed everything. Level 3. Fast SSD. Killing the spinning disk got us 5 to 10 times the speed. But what happens when the cable connecting the drive to everything else becomes the new choke point? NVMe, Non-Volatile Memory Express, answers that question directly. Same underlying flash technology, but plugged directly into the CPU via PCIe instead of routing through a legacy connector. The speed ceiling jumps to somewhere between 3,000 and 7,000 megabytes per second. A conventional SSD maxes out around 550. You're not on the same road driven faster, it's a completely different road entirely. Fair warning though, for everyday tasks, browsing, streaming, email, most users genuinely won't feel a meaningful difference versus a standard SSD. The bottleneck just shifts somewhere else, and where it shifts next is exactly what matters. Level 4, RAM. Everything covered so far falls under storage, data that survives when the power cuts. RAM operates on a fundamentally different principle entirely. Switch the machine off, RAM clears itself, completely, instantaneously. Whatever it held a moment ago simply ceases to exist. So what's the point? Because a modern processor runs at billions of cycles per second. No drive, not even NVMe, can keep pace with that. Making the CPU fetch from storage on every operation would be like a sprinter pausing to check a map every few steps. Think of your drive as a filing room down the hall. RAM is the workbench directly in front of you, everything actively in use, within immediate reach. When the workbench overflows, the system borrows from the SSD as a pressure valve, technically functional. But the SSD is orders of magnitude slower than RAM. The machine starts laboring over things it should be breezing through. 8 gigabytes to survive. 16 for genuine comfort. 32 if your workflow demands it. Level 5, VRAM. Here's something that catches a lot of people off guard. The GPU doesn't share your system's RAM. It carries its own, soldered directly onto the card itself. That's VRAM. A CPU handles a small number of complex tasks sequentially. A GPU runs thousands of simpler operations simultaneously. Every pixel, every texture, every frame, rendered over and over dozens of times per second. VRAM sits right there on the card, feeding that process without delay. When it fills up, the GPU starts pulling from system memory instead, and frame rates deteriorate fast. What surprises people is that VRAM pressure isn't a gaming-only story anymore. Running AI models locally, generating images, doing anything adjacent to machine learning, VRAM is where you hit the wall first. Not the CPU, not system RAM. And right now, pushing past that wall costs significantly more than most people budget for. Level 6. Cache. This one runs invisibly, constantly, billions of times per second, and most people have absolutely no idea it exists. Cache memory. Even RAM moves too slowly for the processor. The round-trip latency to system memory is real and measurable at CPU speeds, so engineers placed a small, blazing fast memory pool directly on the chip itself. 3 tiers: L1, L2, L3. L1 might be 64 kilobytes, sitting right beside the core. L3 can stretch to 32 megabytes on a high-end chip, tiny in size, running at full processor speed. Cache hit. Data's already waiting, grabbed in nanoseconds. Cache miss. The chip has to reach all the way out to RAM, a significant weight from the processor's perspective. This is why 2 chips with identical clock speeds can perform so differently in real-world use. A 32 megabyte L3 versus 8 megabytes is the difference between a chip that flows and one perpetually stalled, waiting on itself. Level 7. CPU registers. The absolute summit. CPU registers, not megabytes, not kilobytes. A few dozen individual slots, each holding 64 bits. That's the entire inventory. What sets registers apart from every other layer on this list is fundamental. This isn't memory you retrieve data from. This is memory you compute inside. When the processor executes an operation, adds 2 numbers, runs an instruction, the data must already be sitting in a register. That is where the actual work happens. Not close to the chip, not adjacent to it. Inside the arithmetic unit itself. If the drive is the filing room and RAM is the workbench, registers are the pen in your hand. The point where thought becomes action. Every single layer on this list, from the spinning hard drive at the bottom all the way up, exists for one reason: to keep those registers fed.